Hello and welcome to the Cambridge Foundation Year podcast. My name is Will and I work in the Foundation Year team here at the University of Cambridge. In this series, we will take you through each step of applying for the Cambridge Foundation Year. So we're going to start with looking at the UCAS personal statements and go on to the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire. In later sessions, we will talk about admissions assessments and interviews. So you will hear from current and former Foundation Year students, as well as the academics, the teachers on our course, who will share their experiences and advice in their own words. If you find this week or this month's episode helpful, do hit the follow or subscribe on Spotify or wherever you are listening to the podcast, so you don't miss out on the next parts of the series. All right, let's get started. So what are we covering today in the podcast? In this episode, we're going to focus on the two key written parts of the Foundation Year application, your UCAS personal statement and the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire, or as we call it, the FYSAQ. By the end of the episode, you should have a clear sense of what we are looking for and how you can start planning what you want to say. We'll talk about what a personal statement actually is, how universities use it, and how it fits into the wider UCAS process. We'll give you a simple suggested structure you can follow when writing your personal statement, the kind of things we expect to see in a personal statement for the foundation year, especially around your academic interest and readiness for study. Then we'll move on to the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire, the FYSAQ. What the FYSAQ is and why we use it alongside your UCAS form. How you can prepare for it in advance so you don't feel like you're starting from scratch. And the information you will need to have to hand when filling it in. Finally, we'll finish with some practical steps and things you can be doing after this episode to move forward in your application. But as always, we would recommend you signing up for the Applicant Support Programme. You can find this on the Foundation Year website. Our next session will be taking place in December and is a Q&A episode. So we'll have plenty of time to talk to our student panel and along with some academics about the Foundation Year. And we will also have another session in January. However, this will take place on the deadline for submissions. So this by no means is essential listening. What we'll have in that session, we will talk about what you can expect now your application has been submitted, and we'll hear from academics from the course so we can find out more about the foundation year. But once again, this will take place on the same day as the deadline for UCAS. It is a priority if you want to be considered for the foundation year that you submit by this deadline, which I will raise in this podcast. Now, before we go into much more detail, it is important to just take a quick note. Everything we are talking about in this episode is specifically about the University of Cambridge Foundation Year, how we use the personal statement, how our FYSAQ works, and what we are looking for in applications to this particular programme. Other universities may run their own foundation years or use personal statements in slightly different ways. So if you're applying elsewhere, do make sure to also check the guidance on their websites as well as ours, which you can find at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening, it's foundationyear.cam.ac.uk. So how do you actually apply for the Cambridge Foundation Year? You apply in exactly the same way you would for other UK universities, through UCAS. So let's zoom out for a moment and look at where the personal statement and the FYSAQ fit into the whole application journey. For the Cambridge Foundation Year, the process starts in the same place as any other UCAS application. First, you choose your course, in this case, the Cambridge Foundation Year in Art and Humanities and Social Sciences. Then, when we get to the FYSAQ, is the time you can choose your college, or you can make an open application, so a college can be allocated to you. After this, we would then make arrangements for your admissions test, and this test and what it involves and key dates will come up in later podcasts as we move along with the process. When you submit your UCAS application, this needs to be done by the January deadline, the 14th of January by 6 p.m. Once we receive that, we will invite you, if you are eligible, and all eligible applicants, to complete the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire. A bit later in the cycle, you'll sit your admissions test, and if you're shortlisted, you'll be invited to interview in around March time. Finally, decisions are made and usually released sometime in April. But in this episode, we're not going to unpack every single stage in detail. Instead, we're going to zoom in on the written parts and what you need to be doing now, your personal statement, and then thinking about your FYSAQ responses, because getting those right puts you in a strong position for everything that comes next. Before you get properly into the personal statement, it's worth saying a few words about the UCAS form itself. Slightly less glamorous, but really important and important part of the process. First of all, do not plagiarize. The UCAS form is about you, your details, your qualifications, and your experiences. So it needs to be your own work and in your own words. UCAS routinely checks applications for copied material, and if something is flagged, it can cause real problems for your application. Secondly, let's make sure that everything is accurate. It sounds obvious, but a small mistake that can happen quite often, and it's surprisingly easy to make. And it's really hard for us to fix from our side. Take your time entering things like your name, date of birth, qualifications, and most importantly, your email address. If that's wrong, we will not be able to contact you about the FYSAQ, interviews, or decisions. So make sure your email address is correct. You also see a number of tick boxes and background questions on the UCAS form. For example, about schooling or circumstances. Please don't rush past these. They help us understand your context and can flag out things like disruption or disadvantage that are important for things like this. Also, there is a space to give extra details about courses and qualifications. For instance, if you're resitting a subject, studying independently, or following a slightly unusual program, use this space to explain anything that might not be obvious from the course title. Another part of the UCAS form is your reference, our advice from our webinars. And don't forget, if you've signed up for the Foundation Applicant Support Programme, you can re-watch the recordings from our webinars. But our advice would be to speak to your referee early. Choose someone who knows you as a learner and can talk about your academic potential, not just a teacher of a subject you're applying for. If you're not currently in school or college, that might be a tutor, an adult education teacher, or someone else who can comment on your study skills and readiness for university. Finally, a word on applying early. Sending your UCAS form ahead of the deadline doesn't give you a secret advantage in terms of being shortlisted. We assess all applications fairly once the deadline has passed. What it does do is make life easier. The earlier you submit, the earlier you'll receive the FYSAQ link, and more time you'll have to complete it calmly rather than rushing before the deadline. Our team also appreciates very well organized applicants. So in short, be honest, be accurate, give yourself enough time, and talk to your referee. Once those basics are in place, you can focus your energy on the most interesting bit, crafting a strong personal statement. So let's turn to the personal statement itself. The personal statement is really a chance to speak directly to the people reading your application. It's one part of the UCAS form that you are fully in control of, where you can show us what you're interested in and why you'd be a good fit for the course you have chosen. What are you hoping to learn from it? First, why are you interested in the course? Why you want to study? What excites you about it? What kind of questions or topics draw you in? This isn't about having a perfect career plan, but it's about showing genuine curiosity, interest, and motivation. Second, we're looking at academic interests, ideas, themes, or problems you enjoy thinking about, and the skills you're starting to develop and what will help you study at university. And third, we want to see how you have explored these ideas beyond your normal lessons. This is something we call supercurricular activities. If you go onto the University of Cambridge website and look for supercurricular activities, you can find a very useful PDF with a list of supercurricular activities for subject areas. If you go onto any subject as well, you go to the link on the far end, which I believe is further actions or further activities, something along those lines. There is a list of supercurricular activities under a title saying improve your application. So this is really a valuable advice. That might be, so this may include like books or articles you can read, podcasts, documentaries that have made you think differently, or an online lecture, museum visit, or even a short course you've done in your own time. Those kinds of activities show us that you're beginning to behave like a university student already, following your curiosity and going a bit beyond the set curriculum. If you keep those three things in mind, why this course, why you are interested in academically, or what you're interested in academically, and how you've explored it, you'll be focusing on exactly what we use for the personal statement. Now, you might have heard that UCAS are changing the way the personal statement works, and that can sound a bit worrying. What's actually happening is that the old single block of text is being replaced by three shorter sections. This way, it's going to guide you with some questions. So instead of having to decide how to structure everything from scratch, UCAS now prompts you to talking about particular areas. Each section has a minimum of 350 characters, which is only a few sentences long. So it's long enough to say something meaningful, but not so long that it's overwhelming. And the three questions are, why do you want to study this course? This is where you can explain your motivation and enthusiasm and what draws you to the subject. How have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this subject or course or subject? And then our final question, what else have you done to prepare outside of education, and why were those experiences useful? This is where those super curriculars and relevant experiences come in handy. Things like reading, podcasts, online courses, community projects, for example. Anything you have done to connect academic interests and show skills that will help you succeed on the course. So the format is changing, but the core idea is exactly the same. UCAS and universities like Cambridge still want to know why this course, how you have prepared, and what else you have done that shows your potential. If you keep this in mind as you plan your answers, you'll be on the right track. And we've talked about what is changing, but it's important to say what isn't changing. The overall length of the personal statement is the same as before. You still have up to 4,000 characters in total, including spaces. The only difference is those 4,000 characters are now divided between three sections, instead of being one long paragraph. Although the layout of the UCAS form looks different, the content the universities want to see is broadly the same. We are still interested in your motivation. So if you see older guidance on personal statements, don't panic. Most of the advice is still useful. You're not being asked to do something completely new, you're being asked to organize the same kinds of ideas in slightly clearer boxes. So how do you actually start writing anything for these new sections? A really helpful first step is simply asking yourself some focused questions and jotting down honest answers. So for the first section, why do you want to study this course? Try asking yourself, why am I interested in this subject? Not what you think universities want to hear, but the real reasons. Maybe you love debating ideas, or maybe you're fascinated on how societies work. Maybe you've always been drawn to history, literature, or politics. Are there any particular aspects I enjoy more than others? For example, do you especially enjoy analyzing texts, learning from a certain period of history, thinking about ethics? Being specific here will make your statement sound much more genuine. Then think about what you have learned so far and how that's made you want to take this course at university level. Was there a topic that you studied that really stayed with you, or a piece of work you're proud of? A discussion in class that made you want to keep reading long after the lesson ended? These are great things to mention. And finally, link it back to your current studies. Are there parts of your course that relate closely to what you want to study in the foundation year? How have those subjects helped you build skills like essay writing, interpreting sources, or critical thinking? That will be useful at a high level of study. At this stage, you don't need perfect sentences. It's enough to make a list of some rough notes in response to these questions. If you like, you can even pause the episode here, grab a pen, open a notes tab on an app, and take 5 or 10 minutes brainstorming. Those raw ideas will become the building blocks to help you write your personal statement later. And let's build on those reflection questions a bit more, because this is where the statement can get really specific and personal. Another helpful thing to think about is what course modules particularly interest you and why? For the foundation year, you could say something like politics, law, literature, sociology, depending on which strand catches your eyes in the course description. Try to go beyond I think it sounds interesting, and ask yourself what about it interests you. And can you think of one thing from your wider reading that really stuck with you? Maybe it was a book, a podcast, a documentary. Did you agree, disagree, or have questions? Did it link back to something you studied in class? And what kind of, well, that kind of reflection is exactly what admissions tutors like to see. It makes a strong application. And what skills do you already have that will help you on this course and at university more generally? And where did you develop them? Think about things like writing clearly, managing time, working independently, analyzing sources. These might have come from school or college work, but they may also have come from a job, caring responsibilities, volunteering. Try to link each skill to a concrete example. And finally, it can be useful to ask, do you have any future plans in mind? You don't have to have a fixed career mapped out. Lots of students don't. But if you do have a sense of where you'd like to work in, say education or the charity sector or journalism, it's fine to mention that briefly as part of your motivation. Again, these questions are really just tools to help generate material. You might want to pause the podcast again, make some more bullet points that you can refer back to later. Later on in this podcast, we're going to try to shape these notes into clear, concise answers for the UCAS personal statement. So let's look at some practical do's for the personal statement. First, make sure it reflects your passion for the subject. That doesn't mean you have to sound over the top dramatic. Okay, we're looking for enthusiasm, and it should come through in the way that you talk about ideas, topics, and questions that genuinely interest you. If you can point to specific things you've read, watched, or studied that made you curious, that's a great sign. Do check your spelling and grammar carefully. The occasional typo isn't the end of the world, but lots of small errors can distract from what you're saying. Use spell check, read it out loud, and if you can, ask a teacher, advisor, or trusted adult to read it as well. Do provide evidence of reading and understanding. Rather than just saying, I enjoy politics or I love history, mention one or two concrete examples and say what you took from them. So, for example, I read this and it made me realize this. Listening to this podcast helped me think differently about. This shows that you're engaging with the materials and not just listing it. Do reflect on your experiences and skills. If you mention a job or a project you did at school, try to add a short sentence about what you learned from it. Maybe time management, working with others, or communicating clearly. And do make sure your statement is unique to you. It can be tempting to copy phrases you've seen online or to use AI to write something. But the strongest statement and the best sounding ones sound like a real person talking about their own route into the subject. We'd much rather read something simple and genuine than something that sounds generic and copied. So this leads us to say, be honest. You don't need to pretend you have read dozens of complicated books if you haven't. It's absolutely fine to talk about a small number of things you engage with more depth. Do try to keep the overall tone positive. If there have been difficulties or disruptions in your education, those are important and we'll ask about them at a later date through the FYSAQ. But the personal statement is mainly a place to focus on what you've enjoyed, what you've achieved, and what you are looking forward to academically. And finally, sound like yourself. You don't need to reach for a thesaurus for every sentence, and don't use lots of long words. Clear, straightforward language is often the most effective. Imagine you're explaining to a friendly teacher why you want to do this course. I promise we're not that intimidating. And we've looked at some of the do's of personal statements. Now let's look at some things that are best avoided. First, try not to use cliches. Phrases like I've always been fascinated by, from a young age I was passionate about, or long quotes at the beginning don't really tell us anything specific about you. It's much stronger to dive straight into a concrete example of something you've read, studied, or experienced. Using humor is very risky. Avoid making jokes or trying to be overly funny. Humor doesn't always come across in writing, and you don't always know someone's sense of humor, especially if the reader doesn't know you. You don't have to be very serious or formal, but it's worth keeping a professional tone. Remember that the UCAS form goes into all of your university choices, so don't write as if you're applying for one place. It's fine to mention the Cambridge Foundation year in the FYSAQ, but in your personal statement, try to focus on the subject that interests you rather than a specific university. And try not to repeat yourself or waffle on. If you've made one point once, there's no need to say it again in slightly different words. Because you're working with a character limit, every sentence should be doing a job, giving an example, explaining your thinking, or adding something new. You also don't need to include a definition of the subject. Admission tutors already know what history, politics, or literature are. What they don't know is what you learned from studying them. Use the space to talk about your ideas, experiences, rather than textbook explanations. Another small helpful tip, try not to start every sentence with I. It's totally fine to use I in your statement. You're talking about yourself after all, but you can vary your sentence openings by starting with a book, an experience, or a skill. Studying this helped me learn this, for example. This will help your writing sound more natural and flow better. Finally, be careful about Googling too many example personal statements. A few can be useful, but for getting the sense of the length and tone, but it's easy to end up comparing yourself to others and accidentally copying their structure, their phrases, and their voice. Use them, if you're going to, as light inspiration. Then close the tab and focus on your own story. If you keep the don'ts in mind, you avoid many of the common pitfalls and mistakes that leave room for thoughtful personal and leave more room for thoughtful personal content that really helps your application stand out. And that links neatly into one of the important points we like to make when applying for the Cambridge Foundation year. We expect that you will be applying to several different universities and courses through UCAS. Because of that, we don't want or need a personal statement that is all about the Cambridge Foundation year. You don't need to even mention the Cambridge Foundation year in your personal statement, your UCAS personal statement. Instead, write a strong subject-focused statement that makes a sense for other choices. So, for example, if you're interested in English, then talk about English. That is the statement we expect to read, and we'll take from it what we need about your academic interest and preparation. If you want to talk specifically about why Cambridge or why the foundation year, you will get a dedicated space to do that later in the FYSAQ, where we will also ask targeted questions about your motivation for this particular course. So to finish off this section of personal statements, here are a few good tips. Get started as soon as you can. Honestly, the hardest bit is getting something down on paper or on screen. It doesn't need to be neat. It doesn't need to be full sentences. It can be lists. It can be bullet points. But get started, write something down, and things will start to flow. Also, it doesn't need to be perfect first time. Nobody does a perfect personal statement first time. A personal statement is something that you come back to, you tweak over several drafts. So don't wait until you've got the perfect sentence in your head. Write a version of it now, and we can polish it up later. It also helps to understand the difference between supercurricular and extracurricular activities. Supercurricular activities are ones that extend your learning in and around your subject, things like wider reading, podcasts, and online lectures. Extracurricular activities are things that you do for fun or other reasons. So sports, maybe music if you're not taking music as a subject, or part-time work. Both are valuable, but for the course of the Cambridge Foundation year, we're particularly interested in supercurriculars because this shows academic curiosity. And do get people to read over your drafts. I know it can be intimidating and you don't want people to look at your work and your writing, but they can spot confusing sentences, repeated ideas, or places you haven't quite explained yourself. Just make sure the final version still sounds like you and not like a committee of other people. One really practical habit is keeping a reading or learning log. Every time you read something, watch something, or attend something that connects to your subject, jot it down. write a couple of sentences about what it made you think and ideas that you've come up with. When you write your personal statement and later the FYSAQ, you'll have a ready-made list of examples and reflections to draw on. And once again, we said get started as soon as you can, start early. Even doing a tiny bit of work each week, adding to your log, answering one of the reflection questions we've suggested, or revising a paragraph, you'll be doing things that make the work feel much more manageable when the UCAS deadline comes around in mid-January. And it's very common at this point to think, I don't actually have much to write about yet. If that is you, do not panic. There is still plenty of time to build up your ideas and experiences. Between now and the UCAS deadline, you can do quite a lot of gentle, realistic research that will feed directly into your personal statement. So read around your subject. That could be ebooks, newspaper articles, or journals. You don't have to start with very academic texts. Accessible introductions are absolutely fine. Listen to things. A great way to do this: podcasts, audiobooks, or radio programs on topics you're interested in. If you're listening to this product, you're already doing something in the right direction. One of my favorites, going on to YouTube and watching TED Talks or finding documentaries that link to your subjects. This is a great way of thinking more deeply. And you can, from this, also try short online courses. Many of these are free and give you a structured way to explore a new topic and build study skills. Every time you do one of these, add this to the log. This will be really useful when you're making the personal statements and reflecting in the FYSAQ. It's also worth spending a bit of time looking at the Foundation Year course webpage, looking at the different strands and example modules. See which topics you naturally gravitate towards or have an interest in, and think about how this could develop your interests and give you examples linking to these areas. So if you're currently feeling, I don't have a lot to say right now, that is completely normal, but that doesn't have to stay that way. A little bit of regular reading, listening, or watching, plus some notes on your reactions, will give you plenty of material to write about when it comes time to draft your statement. And now we spend some time on the personal statement, we are going to move on to the FYSAQ, the Foundation Year Supplementary Application Questionnaire. This is an additional online form that we send you after you have submitted your UCAS application, usually about 2 weeks after the submission of your UCAS form. It lets us do a few really important things that the UCAS application can't do on its own. It's a great way to gather additional information about you, especially around your background, circumstances, and experiences that doesn't appear on your UCAS form. It also helps us to check your eligibility criteria and how you have met this for the foundation year. And this is where you can give us the evidence on how you fulfill that criteria. It gives you a dedicated space to explain why you want to study at Cambridge and the Cambridge Foundation Year in particular. This is things like what attracts you to the course, what you hope to get out of it, and how it fits into your longer term plans. It is also where you express a preference for Cambridge College, or say that you're happy to be allocated a college. You don't have to do this, or you don't do this on the UCAS form. You do this on the FYSAQ. So you can think of the FYSAQ as part of the process that really lets us see you in context, your route through education, any challenges you have faced, responsibilities you carry, and specific motivations for choosing the program. So how does it fit into the timeline? Once you have submitted your UCAS application, you get the foundation by the foundation year deadline, your system picks you up and you will be sent an FYSAQ by email. This usually happens quite quickly, within 48 hours. This is why it's important that the email address on your UCAS form is correct. Otherwise, we will not be able to send it. And also check regularly in your junk and spam folder. When you receive the FYSAQ link, you normally have 2 weeks to fill it in and upload any eligibility evidence we've asked for. This might include, for example, a letter from your school, college, documents to confirm a particular circumstance. It's really important to use the time well. Read the questions carefully, draft longer answers in separate documents if that helps, and give yourself a few days before the deadline in case there are technical issues. Once you've submitted the FYSAQ and your evidence, we bring that together with your UCAS application to make a decision about the next steps. For example, whether to invite you to admissions assessment and later on interview. In other words, the FYSAQ isn't an optional extra, it's a key part in how we assess your application. So treating it the same care as your personal statement is a really good piece of advice. So let's break down what we actually want to see, or what you will see when you open the FYSAQ, because it can feel less intimidating once you know what's coming. The questionnaire is divided into a series of sections. Personal information, so this is the basics, who you are, how we contact you, and a few details to help us match your FYSAQ to your UCAS form. Education, which gives you time to talk about your schooling, college, any breaks from study, and any qualifications you're taking or have taken. We have a section for college preference, which is where you can make a choice about your college or you be allocated one. There is no right or wrong answer here. Eligibility information. This is a key section for the foundation year. You'll tell us which eligibility criteria you meet and upload the evidence we ask for. Extenuating circumstances. This is a space to explain any disruption, difficulties, or responsibilities that have affected your education, exam results, and you can do this in your own words. Additional questions. This is where we ask for more reflective questions about your motivation, your interests, and how the course fits into your plans. And finally, this seems like a silly section, but it's an essential one, submit. This is where you can review everything, and we recommend you review everything, check you've uploaded the right documents, and send it to us. On this slide, you can see the QR code that will take you to the FYSAQ guidance. This can also be found on the Foundation Year website at foundationyear.cam.ac.uk. One of the most important parts of the FYSAQ is about eligibility criteria. For the foundation year, to apply for this course, you need to be eligible, which means you must meet at least one in two or more eligibility categories. Those categories can cover things like educational background, household circumstances, or any disruption or disadvantage you experience in your schooling. When you get this section of the FYSAQ, the form will guide you through each category and tell you exactly what evidence we expect. So, for example, a letter from your school or a particular document. There are also super qualifiers for this to make yourself eligible. If you're a care experience or from a forced migrant background, you are automatically eligible for the foundation year, and you only need to provide evidence for this. And let's look a little bit closer at the evidence side of eligibility, because it's something that applicants often worry about. For every criterion you say you meet, you will need to upload some evidence. This evidence is only used to check your eligibility for the foundation year. It's not shared more widely, and it's not used to rank you up against other applicants. It's simply there so we can confirm that you do, in fact, meet the criteria that you've ticked. So some practical points. If we've asked you to upload evidence as an image or PDF, do that where possible. It might be to scan or to take a clear photo of a letter or download a statement. If you have several pieces of evidence for one criterion, it really helps if you can combine them into a single document before you upload. You can do this using Adobe Acrobat or free tools such as an online PDF combiner. Your school and college or local library might also have advice to help you do this, but you can find advice online on how to combine into a single document. If you're struggling to get the evidence or you're not sure whether what you have is suitable, please don't sit and worry alone. Get in touch with us using the contact details in the guidance or go to the Foundation Year website. We would much rather you ask a question than miss out because you wasn't sure. Okay, so we'd much rather you come to us, ask the question. There are no silly questions. So the key message here is tick every criterion you think you meet, upload the best evidence you can, and let us know if anything is unclear or any difficulties in doing so. And let's talk a little bit about colleges, because it's something that often confuses applicants. The University of Cambridge is made up of a number of individual colleges, and this is who you make your application to. Of the 29 colleges that admit undergraduates, 12 currently take foundation year students. And these are shown on the screen: Downing, Fitzwilliam, Girton, Gonville Quays, Homerton, Lucy Cavendish, Murray Edwards and Newnham, which are both women-only colleges. Queen's, Sydney Sussex, St Edmunds and Wolfson, which are our mature colleges, those final two. So we have St Edmunds and Wolfson as our mature colleges. Each of these colleges would typically take around roughly 5 foundation year students each year. You are fully part of the university and the foundation year cohort, but you're also a member of one of the colleges and their community. This is where you will live, eat, socialise, and often where some of your teaching and supervisions will take place. When you fill in the FYSAQ, you will have a chance to express a preference for one of these colleges or say that you're happy for us to allocate you one. There's no secret strategy here. You won't be disadvantaged by choosing one or by leaving it open. We simply encourage that you have a look at the different colleges on the website, maybe using the virtual tour, and see which one appeals to you, and then be honest about your choice and if you have a preference. Choosing the college is one of the fun parts of applying, but it can also feel a little bit mysterious. The college is essentially your home at Cambridge, and once again, where you live, eat, where you'll make friends, and often where supervisions and small group teaching will take place in the undergraduate course. For colleges they are all just part of the same university and all offer the same degree in the end, but you have your own community layout and feel. The foundation year, you don't need to pick a college on the UCAS form. Instead, you do it at the FYSAQ. So you can either name a college or make an open application. There is no advantage or disadvantage either way. So only name a college if you have a genuine preference. It can also help you reflect on what matters most to you. Do you like the idea of a smaller, quieter college or a larger, busier one? Would you like a women-only college or a mature college? If you can't visit in person, it's still a great tool that you can use, and to get a good feel is to use the college website or to use the virtual tour on the university website, where it has 360-degree photos, lots of useful videos, and it lists out the college's facilities and their location in the town. And here are some final pieces of advice about how to write answers in the FYSAQ. When you get longer written questions, we would like you to treat your answers like short essays. This means means writing in full sentences and organized paragraphs rather than bullet points or note form. Try to avoid text to speak or lots of abbreviations. Write in clear, careful style. Each question will have a word limit, and it's really important you stick to that word limit. Part of what we're looking for is your ability to express ideas clearly and concisely with a set space, which is exactly the kind of skill you'll need to use your time at university. So before you click submit, have a quick check. Does it read like a mini essay? Are my sentences complete and clear? Am I within the word limit? If the answer to those questions is yes, you're on the right lines. Here's an example, or here are the questions that you will be facing. What interests you in the foundation year at Cambridge? You have about 300 words or max of 300 words to answer this. This is usually your chance to explain why or to join the dots as to between you and the specific course. A good way to think about this is in 3 short paragraphs. First, you might want to write about the academic side. Secondly, you might want to write about why Cambridge or why this is the route into Cambridge. And finally, you might want to talk about your future plans, why this course at this university is for me now, and what you have done exactly is what we're asking for. The next question in the FYSAQ, what do you hope to achieve by participating in the foundation year with a 200-word limit? Here we're asking for you to look forward and to tell us how you see this course helping you grow. Clear answers might touch on 3 areas like academic development, what skills or habits you want to build, personal or practical growth, and also the next steps, how completing the foundation year would open you up to your future plans. You don't need to make grand statements here. We're looking for thoughtful, honest reflection. This question is about joining the dots between your circumstances and your education. So the question here, what do you think the impact of your circumstances you have faced so far and that have made you eligible for the programme has been on your education? You don't need to repeat everything you've already told us in eligibility and extenuated circumstances sections. Instead, focus on the educational impact. For example, you might want to briefly explain what your circumstances are. If it's interrupted schooling, it might mean that you've missed lessons or whole terms. Limited It may have limited the subjects or grades that you could realistically aim for, or affected your ability to revise, submit homework, or sit exams. Try to be clear and specific. It helps us to understand your achievements in context. Can you describe any additional responsibilities you have? This is another short one, 100-word limit. We're interested in anything you do alongside your studies that takes time or energy or emotional effort. Caring responsibilities for family members or siblings, working part-time or 0-hour shifts, volunteering in the community or involvement in faith groups, being a young parent or a carer, or living independently at a young age. You don't need to list everything you've ever done. Focus on the responsibilities that are regular and significant, and briefly explain what you do, how often, and how it affects your time to study. This helps us to understand your achievements in the light of everything else you're managing. The last big FYSAQ question, and this is a very open one. Is there anything you would like us to know? You have 600 words to play with, and this is a chance to fill in any gaps in the picture we have of you. You don't have to absolutely use all 600 words, but you can if you want to. And this is more of an opportunity to explain anything that we don't already know. You could expand on your story that don't neatly fit into those tick boxes. So talking about moving schools, health issues, or time out of education. You can also use this space to tell us about strengths, things you're proud of, skills you developed, or projects you've worked on that show potential but don't appear anywhere else. A useful approach is to ask yourself, if an admissions tutor could only know 3 extra things about me, what would they be? This is a great way to structure your answer around these points in clear paragraphs and keeping focus on how they relate to your education and readiness for the foundation year. You're welcome to leave this box blank if you feel everything important has already been covered, but if there is something on your mind that you want us to understand before making the decision, this is exactly the place to say it. And to finish off our section on the FYSAQ, here are some top tips to keep things as smooth as possible. First things first, get started as soon as you can. You don't want to wait until you've submitted the UCAS form to look at the guidance. All of the FYSAQ information is on the Foundation Year website, and reading it in advance can help the form feel much less daunting when it arrives. Second, gather your evidence early. If you know you will need letters from school, documents from the local authority, or statements from your support workers, start asking for those now. Some of them can take a little bit of time to produce, and it's much less stressful if you're not chasing right up to the deadline. When your UCAS form is submitted, keep an eye on your emails. If you haven't received the FYSAQ link in a few days, check your junk folder, and if it's not there, get in touch with us, go to the Foundation Year website and send us an email. And of course, don't miss the deadline. Put it in your calendar. So the 14th of January by 6 p.m. This is when you need to submit on UCAS. If you don't do that, we can't send you the FYSAQ and you can't finish your application. And finally, when you're working through the form, double check you're attaching the right evidence to the right criteria. A quick review before hitting submit can save you a lot of time going back and forth and a lot less stress. If you follow these steps and gather the information early, you will have lots of time to develop a strong, clear FYSAQ along with your UCAS application. And a final practical tip. Because so much of the foundation year process happens by email and digitally, it's really important that the messages actually reach you. So as soon as you can, add these addresses, and I'll read them out in a second, to your safe sender list or contacts. So foundation.year@admin.cam.ac.uk, FYSAQ @admin.cam.ac.uk, and CAM Foundation Year at qemailserver.com. These are the addresses that we'll use to send you your FYSAQ link, reminders, and any updates about your application. If they're in your contacts, they're much less likely to be something that will be automated into your junk folder or to get lost in the depths of your inbox. And at this stage, I would like to say thank you for joining us for the podcast and invite you to join us for the Applicant Support Programme webinar for the live Q&A with students that will be taking place in December. This is an opportunity for you to ask questions about UCAS, the FYSAQ, personal statements, how they enjoy study on the foundation year, balancing study, life, and other responsibilities. So make the most of the Applicant Support Programme. You can sign up for this at the website or on the QR code on the screen. Register for the webinars, and you also receive details for access to the recordings for all the previous webinars as well. So if you have missed our session dedicated to personal statements, the FYSAQ, you can visit these at a later date. And a reminder that our January session is taking place on the same day as the UCAS deadline. Do not join that January webinar if you have not completed your submission, because you need to submit through UCAS by 6 p.m. on the 14th of January to be considered for the foundation year. You can always sign up, you'll receive the recording and watch that Q&A back at a later date. If you have submitted before the 14th of January, we would love to see you in the new year, where we'll have a Q&A panel talking about the next steps, and we'll have a number of our teaching staff joining us on a panel. But thank you very much for listening to this month's episode of the podcast. Hopefully you have found it helpful, and we will see you in the next session. Have a wonderful day.